Well, good morning, and thank you very much for joining us. I am Yori Folarin. The subsidy debate, we're going to continue with it. There's very little else because it's so central to, quite frankly, the way we're running our affairs in this country and how life shall be moving on. It's no news anymore. The subsidy has been removed. The, oil and gas, well, the petroleum product subsidy has been removed. Labor, is up in arms against it. And, well, by the way, you also know that an industrial court, sort of forbade labor from going on strike. But here we are. Now, joining us this morning, our guest is Mr. Gbenga Olawepo Hashim. He's a politician. He's an oil and gas entrepreneur, among many other things. A fine morning to you, Mr. Gbenga Olawepo Hashim.
Good morning. It's my pleasure to be with you.
Indeed, it's our pleasure too. I imagine that most people are saying that labor needs to look at it again and not insist. The twin impulse of labor is that, one, we must return to the status quo, that is before the increase that has now become a general increase. Return to that, then let's talk. That's the central plank. Both the NLC and the TUC have asked for this, but I have the idea that it's not going to happen. But we still must make progress.
Well, that is not going to be the way forward. Going backward is not the way forward. Simply because even if you revert back to the old price now, most of the increases that has already happened on a range of goods and services in the market are not going to return to the old price. So people who are engaged in such activities would only be making a kill on the economy, while the economy will be losing. So the question of reverting to the old price doesn't arise. The market has already reacted to this. It has absorbed it. And so what we can talk about is negotiating how to mitigate the impact of the increase on the vulnerable sectors, that is the working class people, who cannot do the kind of adjustments that the market has already done to prices of goods and services. As an entrepreneur, what I did in my establishment immediately was that I gave transport subsidy to all my workers across across board, regardless of what their salary scale had, because we're talking about the impact on transportation here. So I want to assume that that's what most employers of labor should be doing now. And I believe that government is also going to be focused on how to mitigate this impact on the workers in the public sector as well as in the civil service. I have not been a supporter of removal of subsidy in the past. I've studently campaigned against it, along with labor and all that. I sympathize with their position. But one of the reasons why I had to do that in those years was that one was not confident that the promised gain of the subsidy removal will be managed in the interest of all Nigerians. Now the times are quite different now. We have a more focused president that has been elected, Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu, who is a good political economic manager. I studied his vision for management of the economy, and I have trust that he will be able to manage the gains of this subsidy removal in the interest of all and in the overall interest of the national economy. This is a very painful process. It's like putting a sick patient under the slab to go through surgery because you needed to save the life of that patient. Subsidy regime has been a very terrible cancer in the Nigerian economy. And this pain we have to appeal to all and sundry to bear so that we can transit to the benefit for all. But we should focus on mitigating the impact quickly on the working people.
You were a presidential candidate yourself, and I bring that up because all of the leading presidential candidates in the last election, that one where Nigerians gave their mandate to Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu, all of them actually said that this was a first order of priority. So it doesn't matter who it was, whether it was Atiku, whether it was Obi, whether it was Tinubu, and indeed whether it was Kwakwanso. It didn't matter who. Everybody said this was the right thing to do, and they were going to do it, and there were no complaints at the time. In fact, people sort of knew that that is the only way to go, because this subsidy has been called a scam. Now, let me come to you, because you're an oil and gas entrepreneur. In fact, you're CEO of Transitional Energy Limited, operators of PPL 221. Tell me, give me your own commentary on it's a scam. There never was any, subsidy at all. This was going straight into the pockets of some at the expense of Nigerians. Now, I ask you the question because you would know better than most ordinary people.
Well, there have been reports and there have been prosecutions, there have been investigations which empirically demonstrated this, that it was a corrupt regime. And when you have a very weak public and civil service in terms of institution and personnel and in terms of accountability and transparency mechanism, subsidy are always abused, whether it is fertilizer subsidy or it is oil subsidy or whatever. Now, but the most important thing for me as an entrepreneur is that removal of subsidy signals to the market that it is time to invest more in the mid and downstream sector of the Nigerian economy. And these investments have been locked out because no investor wants to risk having to bargain with civil servant and public servant for the payment of his invoices. You would rather want to take your product to the market. And because you had a subsidy regime, it has been a disincentive even to investment in the mid and downstream sector of Nigeria. With the removal of the subsidy, it's not just Dangote refinery that you are going to be seeing now. You are going to be seeing some small refineries because you always take your product to the market and your product will not be sold through a corrupt bureaucratic regime with the pricing system of the past represented. So more than the price impact and saving is the fact that you are not going to see a lot of investment in the mid and downstream sector. And this is the sector that really generates employment and adds value to the economy in the oil sector. You can just punch a well with a rig of a few people, and you don't need more than a base station of about 5 to 20 people to maintain it. But when it comes to refinery, when it comes to fertilizer, when it comes to all the other petrochemical component that comes from the midstream and downstream sector, these are sectors that create millions of jobs. And for me, this is the most important benefit. And Nigeria has missed out in a long time on this value chain due to our subsidy regime. So beyond gaining money, cleaning up the mess in the subsidy regime where some few Nigerians were being enriched, the workers were not benefiting from the regime, the poor was not benefiting. just a few oil thieves who are benefiting from that regime, and this has ended. So what we need now to focus on, as I said, is how to mitigate the impact of this on the trade union movement, particularly the workers, who will bear the direct impact of this. And you can do that by having things like transport subsidy, which can be immediate, and then the workers themselves, their leaders who will do well to go back to the negotiation table and negotiate safety valves for themselves. It's not the first time we're going to have this kind of thing. Under Pascal Bafia, we had things like labor transport that were managed even by the NLC. They had their mortgage bank and all that. So these times call for creativity, innovation to be able to wade through this. So making strikes or threatening strike is not in the interest of anyone.
And there are many knowledgeable people within labor, whether NLC or TUC. In fact, Mr. Jero, the president of NLC, he's a journalist. Well, if you want, you can say former journalist, but I guess it's one of those situations like once a soldier, always a soldier. I bring that up because he's knowledgeable. He knows virtually everything that you've just said. Now, Labor, the union, of course, is affiliated with Labour Party, Labour the party. And whereas Mr. Ajero is, speaking for the workers, it is speaking up for the workers, he's aware of all you've just said. So I'm at a loss, really, because there's nothing you've said here that Labour doesn't know already. But insisting in this way, well, when I say insisting, I want to put it correctly because he did use the expression that how do you negotiate with a gun to one's head, meaning that the deed had been done, and now we're talking. He would have loved for there to have been talk. He had said, in fact, it was thought that we have all of June. No subsidy provided for the month of June. We have all of June. And so I heard him say at one place that he would have expected this to, the status quo to remain until maybe the last week of June. Then we can start preparing. I don't know. That has led some people, maybe unkindly, to begin to and say that Labour is being political.
There were no provisions for any subsidy regime in the budget. And everybody had access to the budget and knew what the positions were. I don't think anybody is in doubt that by the month of June, the subsidy regime will have ended. So it's not news to anyone, either the labor leaders or everyone that was involved with the management of the petroleum sector, as well as government. As you said, some of these points are well clear to Mr. Jero and a lot of other comrades. Interestingly, and these are people that some of us are related with as student union leaders in the past. 3.5 decades we have been on the same line. We were opposed to subsidy all the way because we never believed that the previous administrations will be able to manage the gains of the removal in the interest of all. Now, as I have said, there's a need to shift ground now because Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu has a track record of being a good manager. So the question is simply a question of trust. Who are you negotiating with? And I see a bold program in the renewed hope for Nigeria. I read it, I reviewed it in October. I looked at the new budgeting model, which is fundamentally different from what we have had since 1986. I saw a bolder attempt to restructure in the economy in such a way that the Nigerian economy will gain its self-reliance and indigenous development momentum, which has not been the case since 1986. So I have more trust, in the ability of the administration. And I think a lot of Nigerians also do. And you will see that the private sector, both local and global, has received this very well. So, and I quite understand that there are impacts of this on the Labour constituency. So the question is simple. We cannot go back to the old order, because even if you reverse the price now, I mean, all the price of the food items, transportation, and all other things. I was watching a TV program, and a lady said, look, we photocopied one page for 20 naira before. Now we have made it 50. And the question is, you have toner that you are buying, so is it the petrol product that is the only input that makes you to be able to increase it by 150%? So even if you revert back to the old price, those who have made a bet on the economy by already increasing their prices are not going to come down on their price. So what is going to be the purpose of reverting to the old price? It makes no sense.
I heard the NLC Labour, this is just in passing, saying that it wasn't the business of NMPC to release the price regime that they did. In fact, they had said that such a release would have come after consultation, and it wasn't for NMPC. In fact, people say that it would have been released by the presidency. Give me your thoughts on that.
Well, the NMPC is the major supplier of the product in the market. That's the point.
The right to establish the prices anyhow, the way it wants?
No, it's not about establishing the prices anyhow. It's a question of the market price. What's the landing cost? What's the landing cost in most other African states, neighboring states and all that? Don't forget that the refineries have not been working, okay? And now when you're going to be having private refineries, the landing cost is not going to be the same as previously. And so except government wants to subsidize a part of it, that's what is called the subsidy. What is the landing cost? And what is the sales cost? The difference between the landing cost and the sales cost is the subsidy.
Strike out that particular point that Labour made, that it wasn't for the NMPC to establish the price. You would strike out that point as maybe...
The NMPC is the major supplier of products to the market.
Yes, it is. Yes. But it's a monopoly. And that situation is being adjusted now. It's just being adjusted now.
Well, now you have Dangote refinery is going to be working by end of July, we hope. And that's a very huge game changer in the Nigerian economy. Then you will also see some other refineries that will be, so you will have a lot of domestic source of supply, and Nigeria will be self-sufficient.
So the price might go down.
But the question is, the landing cost is still going to be the landing cost, And if you don't have a subsidy regime, then that means you'll be subsidizing the cost of production on the refinery.
I'm not speaking for Labour, but Labour had said that, look, they had the impression, this is the NLC, that they had the impression, because President Tinubu had said so, that we're not going to lord it over anybody. There will be consultations. So that, for example, the 488 naira in Lagos, it's different other places. It goes, over 500 in other areas. And you've just explained that, it's simple, really. It's about the landing cost and all of that. When they decided like that, did they have the right to decide it the way they wanted, because they are the major supplier? As I said, not speaking for Labour, but these are some of the points that were brought up that Labour said makes us angry, and that's not the way to do business. Well,
it's not every policy that will benefit everybody and that will make everybody happy. The important thing is you want to see what benefits the majority of the people. Some of the labor people are also civil and public servants that manage this subsidy regime that we're talking about, in their various status. And the truth of it is that we cannot continue on that track. That's the point. We can't continue on that track. And as you said, virtually all the presidential candidates and aspirants had a consensus on this issue of removal of subsidy. And this is essentially because of the corrupt public and civil service system, which the majority of the labor leaders are superintending over. And the problem in that is that it's very difficult to even reform it because you have all kind of civil and public service rules that protect. It's almost very difficult to discipline any worker in the public sector. They are so protected with all kind of regulations that it's almost practically difficult to hold them accountable. So the only way you can have a reform is to use the market, because it's almost practically impossible to reform the public and the civil service structure in the administration of the subsidy regime. Yes, there are some few businessmen who are enjoying this corrupt subsidy regime, but they do so in collaboration with public servants, who are either members of NLC or the Senior Staff Association. So we shouldn't pretend that we are dealing with a value-free regime, all right? So the question is, Nigeria has got to move forward. And all that we need to do is to pay attention and appeal to the workers to show understanding and make their patriotic commitment, insofar as they are able to get some concession from government that will mitigate the impact of this price increase. The labor does not have the mandate to manage the economy. The labor has the mandate to protect the welfare of their members, to ensure that their incomes are not wiped away, and they have a collective bargaining mechanism for doing that. But they cannot insist that they are going to be the managers of the economy. They can't manage the economy. The people who manage the economy presented their program to Nigerian electorate. People voted for them. Nobody was deceived as to what is going to be the fate of the subsidy regime. They were well debated, and the Nigerian electorate endorsed this program, and President Tinubu has the mandate to pursue his program. So this is the question. Who has the mandate to manage the economy? Is it Labour or the elected president? The elected president has the mandate to manage, the democratic mandate to manage the economy, while Labour can speak as regards the welfare, of their followers. If they are talking about they want to decide what price mechanism operates in the economy, they are going beyond their mandate as trade unions.
I hear you. Labour also heard you. They heard your perspective, because I guess what they were saying was that, look, because of what you've just said, that it is their business to look out for the welfare of workers, and this was definitely going to affect the welfare of workers. Could you not see your way to letting us be part of, the negotiations for what, for instance, is the actual correct landing cost? We've been deceived in the past. Our money has been stolen under subsidy. I'm being very crude here. I'm not using the refined language that one can use to avoid the words corruption and stealing. But that has been going on for so long in Nigeria. And it's now gone. The president said it clearly. Subsidy is gone. And a lot of people will be able to read into that what I have just finished saying in crude language, that no more shortchanging of Nigerians. That money is now going to be put to good use. And while that is going on, there will be, I think the federal government prefers the word.
For farmers, for infrastructures, and then for opportunities for unemployed people. So
Say
for
again?
all Nigerians, including labor, but not just limited to labor.
I hear you. I hear you. So, but as I was saying, we're just trying to understand this a bit better, but I guess most people understood it from the 29th of May when President Tinubu said, a very short sentence, it's gone. Although whether that was now, an indication, say, everybody go and, because within, that within hours, if not instantaneously, pump prices are changed all over the place. Although there are, my
take is that as Nigerians, we should be forward-looking. We cannot be going backward. We need to be forward-looking. This country has got a lot of potential. It is now time to translate that potential to reality, to real gain for all Nigerians. I mean, a lot of economic projections have made assertions like the PwC report, which was done in 2015, says that by 2050, Nigeria is going to be the 9th largest economy in the world. And some of these things that inhibits our development are things like this subsidy regime that we're talking about. There is so much infrastructure investment, that is looking for opportunity to come into this country. But all these bottlenecks, bureaucratic bottlenecks, corrupt pricing system have been an inhibition for this inflow, both at the private sector, domestic level, and even for foreign direct investment. When we remove these obstacles, such as we saw when we removed the corrupt regime of telephoning, where Nigeria had only 450,000 lines, and now you talk about over 100 million lines, about 118 million lines to be specific, after we have liberalized and decentralized that sector. It stimulated investment. Now, it's not all the time that the prices of petroleum products will be high. Once crude price goes low a bit, it will reflect in lower prices. So it's not going to be forever that we're going to see these high prices.
So this is exactly what President Tinubu meant. Most right-thinking members of society know it, but there would appear to be, I guess, labor just has to be, carried along. I guess that's what it's all about. And I don't see how...
Some of them are our comrades, and we fought, side by side with them for democracy, and we have always been their allies for a long time. And I think President Tinubu himself is also an ally of the working class in Nigeria. That's why you have a whole lot of people who are from that background, around him, Adams Oshiomhole, Issa Aremu, and a whole lot of us who came from that background, either as former student union leader or former labor leaders in those eras. We understand these issues. And as you said, the labor leaders also understand these issues. Now the question is, we just have to sit down and bargain and negotiate. We cannot use the language of ultimatum for each other and say, if you don't do this, we are not going to do this. This is not going to be the modality for this kind of talk. It has to be a different mechanism. You just have to bargain and argue your point and take off the strike threat